Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So the series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, July 2nd, 1776, you recognize that year, 1776, early July, some big stuff happening. On this day, a man by the name of John Dickinson, a delegate at the Continental Congress, abstained on the final vote for American independence. A couple days later, July 4th, he once again abstained from the final wording on the Declaration of Independence and did not put his signature on that document. So let's talk about the forgotten founder, why someone would decide to sit that moment out. Here to discuss it all is Nicole of Columbia. Hello, Nikki.
Hey, Jody.
Our guest as always, and our special guest for this episode and the next 3 is John Dickerson. 60 Minutes, the Slate Political Gabfest, Whistle Stop, which is near and dear to us here in the political history podcast universe. And the new book from John is The Hardest Job in the World. John, we're really excited to have you on. Thanks.
I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
So John Dickerson on to talk about John Dickinson. Does this happen to you all the time? Do people walk up to you on the street and say, hey, are you that guy who abstained from signing the Declaration of Independence?
Exactly. Well, you know, in the land of Google searches, people have often miswritten Dickinson's name as Dickerson. And so there was a period where I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. One of the founders had the same name. And I'd like to go learn about that founder because I'm vain and only care about things that have my own name. And then I would do a little investigation, find out, no, they just misspelled it. So that's about as close as I'll come to having any lasting impact on our government.
That is a better Google name problem than Rick Santorum has, so not too bad.
That's true.
You know, the John Dickinson thing is so interesting to me because he is this kind of forgotten founder, and yet he did this thing that you would expect would make him a byword in history, right? Here is the moment, this world historic decision you have to make, and you're standing there on the precipice of history, and they say, are you for independence or not? And he says, pass. And it just seems like one of those things like Benedict Arnold or Doubting Thomas, that his name would become a watchword for not meeting the moment, kind of like Neville Chamberlain did. And I think that maybe one of the reasons why that didn't happen is because if you dig into his biography a little more, he actually did a ton of things. It was just when the moment came, he blinked.
And, you know, what you do, Nikki, which is study things in their context and in their totality. And as I started to go back and look at this, now that everything turned out and worked out just fine with the revolution, even when they rewrote the Articles of Confederation 10 years later and replaced it with a Constitution, which was itself a huge risky gamble, but it all looks so predetermined now that, as you said, it's like, how could you not vote for it? How could you be on the wrong side of history? And yet, as I did more reading about it, his concerns were, you know, prudent. And it gets at the really interesting question of revolutionaries and the revolutionary temperament that's necessary for revolution, and then the temperament that's necessary to keep a revolution going or turn it into a government, which was the great experiment that turned out okay, but there was definitely no chance it was going to. I guess my point is he was right to be cautious.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what is your sense of sort of his caution? I mean, he was not like a British loyalist who didn't want there to be a new nation. He had, procedural concerns about the pace at which independence was taking place?
Yeah, I mean, he had some procedural concerns, but his actual concerns, as John was saying, were not only legitimate, they actually were borne out a little bit. I mean, he was concerned that these 13 different colonies were not going to be able to agree on a lot of things. He didn't know that they could form a government. And in fact, as John said, the Articles of Confederation fail the first time because they don't do a very good job of knitting these states together. And then he's worried about whether the United States can actually fend off foreign powers. Not only does what would become the United States need foreign powers in order to win the American Revolution, as we all know from Hamilton, but it also really does face exterior threats right through, I would say, until the War of 1812, which is the last big push to defend the United States from outside influence. So his concerns were incredibly legitimate.
I came to know a little bit about him. I came to know about him for another reason we'll get to in a moment, which is totally through a back door. But when I, for the book, went back and looked at the Constitutional Convention and Washington's reluctance to go to Philadelphia 10 years after the Declaration or so, 11 years, Washington is basically concerned about some of the same things, that the people haven't suffered sufficiently, that they're ready for the change that is on the table. So reading about Dickinson, basically a totally realistic fear that antipathy towards the monarchy was not a sound basis for an entirely new form of government, and that once they might remove themselves from the shackles of Great Britain or of England, they wouldn't be able to, they would just go back to fighting with each other. I mean, the colonies would fight and there'd be nothing that would bind them together. And why weren't there more people on his side, really, after reading about it?
And his cautions really are expressed in important ways. He doesn't just sit there and lean back and cross his arms and say, I don't know, you guys, you're not doing this right. There are a lot of things to watch out for. He's actually really involved in developing, the arguments for independence, or at least the arguments for Britain to change its relationship to the colonies. He pushes back against the Townshend Acts. He writes the Olive Branch Petition, which is sort of this last-ditch effort to make peace with the monarchy. And then after the revolution, he's there helping them figure out how to build a government that's actually going to work. And so I think this is another reason why he is sort of rescued from his misstep at the time of independence, which is that he's in there actually doing the work. He doesn't abandon the cause. He's there creating the arguments and helping to build the government that's going to eventually work for the United States.
So is there something there then in terms of kind of thinking about his legacy and whether he's remembered or misremembered? Is there something there about the fact that he was articulating something that, had some substance to it and was potentially, recognized for that in his time? Did that save his legacy, that the founders didn't turn around and be like, oh, by the way, there was this one guy and we're going to seal his legacy in the next year or two while he's, we were able to sort of shame him?
I guess. I wonder, going back to Nikki's original point, I wonder if there shouldn't be a phrase or expression for the role he particularly played, because I didn't realize what a celebrity he was for writing the letters as the farmer from Pennsylvania. Such a celebrity that when he doesn't vote on the 2nd of July, I found this quote that I really loved. That was, he was basically happy to be free of his notoriety. And he said, no youthful lover ever stripped off his clothes to step into bed to his blooming beautiful bride with more delight than I have cast off my popularity. So he is popular for coming up with the argument for why there shouldn't be taxation, which is a movement towards independence from the monarchy, but then doesn't go all the way. So as Nikki was saying, he's not just being fussy and obstreperous. He's responsible for kind of getting the revolution down the road a little bit, but then just isn't ready to go all the way. He's worried about the lack of foreign allies, worried about everybody sticking together once they break from Great Britain. And so what's that position called, or it should be called the John Dickinson position, which is a revolutionary except in the kind of last step, but not merely a tool of the monarchy or lacking in imagination or creativity, because he had enough imagination and creativity to be a hero of the colonies. And
we have this conversation now about kind of revolution and half measures and incrementalism and allyship. So maybe we don't have that tidy catchphrase or name for that role, but I think we can recognize it in sort of these bigger conversations. It is interesting. He does have some good quotes under his belt, including one when he kind of abstains from signing the Declaration. He says he himself, I think, thought this was going to be worse for his reputation than it ended up being. He talks about it, quote, giving the finishing blow to my once great integrity and my popularity. But then he does kind of, Nicky, have a second act. I mean, it's not like he slinks off, takes off his clothes, gets in bed with his wife and disappears forever. He kind of has a little second political career.
Yeah, he absolutely does. I mean, he is involved in the writing of the Articles of Confederation. He's involved in helping to defend the Constitution to get it adopted. He helps draft the First Amendment. He's the president of Pennsylvania back when the president was not a title reserved for the head of the country. So he does have this really important second act. I think that's exactly right. If we can break his life in before the revolution and after. And then when he dies in 1808, he is praised by Thomas Jefferson, who's the president of the time, as among the first of the advocates for the rights of this country. And I think that that's something that we should remember, that among the founders, he was seen as not just a friend and an ally, but somebody who was crucial to the development of the United States.
And it was that relationship with Jefferson that's the subject of how I first focused on him, which is that it's Jefferson's letter to Dickinson in which he writes that the presidency brings me nothing but unceasing drudgery and daily loss of friends, which is one of the, star quotes in the long list of quotes of presidents whining about the job.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start to wrap up here. I will say, though, Nick, as you were describing, he had Delaware ties, Pennsylvania ties. My mind immediately went towards, when thinking of legacy, does this man have a rest stop named after him? He does not have a rest stop named after him. But there are a fair number of John Dickinson statues floating around and stuff named after him. So, he's out there. And now when you see that name, hopefully you'll know a little bit more. So,
and things are getting renamed all over the place, so maybe someday soon.
Yeah. Will John Dickinson get uncanceled? It is the question on everyone's lips. Yes.
Well, isn't that actually, though, the question you were asking, though, was that he wasn't really totally canceled by not taking this great historic vote?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It is interesting. All right, there's hope for us all. So let's wrap up. But I do want to say we occasionally do these also on this day, and there's a number of interesting ones out there. The one I do want to just flag is that it is Thurgood Marshall's birthday. 1908, he was born on this day. We're going to do a Thurgood Marshall episode at some point, but I just figured I'd acknowledge that. Oh, and as we do these goodbyes, everyone's going to plug. We're going to do some plugs because there's some cool things happening in our respective worlds this week. So, Nikki, tell everyone about the trailer that just dropped for this amazing project you're working on.
Yes, we just dropped the trailer to Welcome to Your Fantasy, which is an 8-part podcast series about the Chippendales dancers. So you can find that wherever podcasts are downloadable, and it comes out for real on August 11th.
Very excited for that.
Wow.
Look, I zig when other people zag, John.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. No, exactly. They were not at the Constitutional Convention.
They were not.
And John Dickerson, the new book is called The Hardest Job in the World. Thank you so much. And you will be back with us for the next 2 episodes as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Jody. And thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
And then one quick shout out. You hear me at the end of every episode say that our producer and researcher is Jacob Feldman. Jacob is also a staff writer for the website Sportico.com, which just launched this week as well. So go check out Sportico, and congratulations to Jacob. This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX. You can find out lots more, including how to suggest a topic, at thisdaypod.com. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia from PRX.